Well, as you can see, I'm wearing a turtleneck. I wish I could say that I planned this in honor of Mr. Milchick, but truth is, this is just what I wore today. So,
Oh, serendipity!
like many of you, I've recently become astounded,
Quite frankly, I am astounded
by the quality and profundity of Apple TV's Severance. By brief way of synopsis, the show follows Mark S., a good-natured worker with a weird mouth.
You are a worthless, friendless, lip little piece of
No, Terry, that wasn't very nice.
That's not very nice.
As I was saying, he's a good-natured worker with a funny mouth, and we follow his day-to-day activities in the show. The catch? Mark isn't just a person. He's actually two people. Or is he? Mark is severed. When he's in the office, he's Mark S., the cheerful, hardworking manager of the macro data refinement team. A completely distinct version of himself from his real-world counterpart, complete with his own set of values, memories, and perhaps more importantly, lack thereof. Outside of the office, Mark Scout is a grieving widow, a borderline depressive former professor who seems to be somewhat directionless. Mark S. doesn't know Mark Scout. Mark Scout doesn't know Mark S. They share no memories, yet they share a body. Mark S is the innie, Mark Scout is the outie. This is a really cool and unique premise for a sci-fi show, first of all, but like pretty much every good sci-fi story, Severance's true purpose is to explore deep themes and philosophical questions, posing them to the audience as the story unfolds. The first theme that becomes apparent during Severance, at least from the point of view of a formerly religious person,
Hello there.
is a critique on religious fundamentalism. When I use the term fundamentalism, I mean the tendency for religious devotees to practice strict adherence to a set of rules or principles.
Shut it!
At Lumen, no outside material is permitted for the employees to consume. Everything, including the art, is filtered by the shadowy figures at the top that control the dissemination of information. And reading other literature isn't just discouraged, it's forbidden.
Be content in my words, and dally not in the scholastic pursuits of lesser men.
We can see this pressure exemplified when Mark and his team discover Rickon's book on the severed floor. They feel the need to read the book on the sly, in the privacy of the bathroom stall. What they're doing, at least according to the establishment for whom they work, is wrong. Sinful even. This is why they feel the need to do it in the shadows. The employees are not encouraged to think freely or expose themselves to outside ideas. They are corralled into the safe environment provided by the literature on the Lumen approved reading list. The manuals of the company are taught as absolutely true, scriptural, doctrinal. We get the best sense for this through the character of Irving and his strict devotion to the words as they are written.
Something about me is that I know all 9 core Lumen principles.
What's your favorite?
All 9.
His awe and reverence for the founders, and the weight of his contempt for the company when he finally starts to realize that something is not right. Irving is the classic true believer whose faith has been deconstructed, and he falls harder than anyone else. Lumen's policies are more than just a set of rules for the workers to follow whilst in the office. They're gospel, and the showrunners use this religious analogy to warn the viewers of the danger of allowing other people to control what we learn and how we think.
That's James Egan, current CEO. Remarkable man.
That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind.
Which world is real? The innie world or the outie world? Are either of them real? What makes a world real? These might seem intuitively easy to answer,
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
but consider the two perspectives of the outie and the innie. To the outie, the real world is the one we are familiar with. It's the snow on the ground, the house you go home to, the beers you drink, and the TV you watch after hours. But to the innie, that world does not exist at all. To the innie, the real world is the cubicle, the pristine white hallways, the dreaded break room, and the surreal counseling room. To the outie, this is the world that does not exist. So, who's right? What makes a world real? Perhaps you might argue that the real world is whatever world you live in, but to what extent are you willing to defend that idea? Let's say that you live in
Mandalay.
So to you,
Mandalay.
is the real world. But just because you live in
Mandalay.
and I live somewhere else,
Somewhere like, I don't know, Timbuktu.
would you say that my world is not real? Would I say that your world is not real? Of course not. You may respond, okay, they're just different places within the same world. Which is true.
Which it is.
But the world that the innies live in is the same world that the outies live in, just different places within it. But the distinction between the two in Severance is made much more extreme because the innies literally cannot leave their world. So to them, outside may just as well be a concept. Ditto for the outies with the severed floor. The outside world might exist, but to the innies, they have no real direct evidence of it. Functionally for them, it might as well just exist as a concept, but not a real place. You see how these questions can become much more complicated if you just drill down into them a little bit? The idea may seem frivolous at face value, but if you can introduce any amount of doubt into what is real and what isn't, you open a very classic philosophical can of worms. There are many thinkers that have dabbled in this space throughout history. Think Plato's allegory of the cave. Think Descartes' dreamer's doubt. Think simulation theory, made ever so popular by the Matrix.
I am a person. You are not.
This is sort of an extension of the previous idea about the reality of one's world, but since the innies only exist during the workday, do they count as much as the outies do? Are they people in the same way that you and I are people?
I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
What are people? What is a woman? What is a man?
A miserable little pile of secrets.
What has he got?
If not himself, then he has not.
What exactly makes a person? Is it memory? Is it memory and physical being? Computers have memory and physical being, but do they count as people? What's the answer, Ben?
Oh yeah, you can milk anything with nipples.
I have nipples, Greg. Could you milk me?
Not helpful, Ben. You may say, okay, well, given computers have memory and physical being, maybe what you need is autonomy to be a person, which would thus imply that the innies aren't really people since they have almost no say in what happens to them, either without or even within the Lumen offices. But are you really comfortable saying this guy is not a person? Look at him.
Look at him. Look at his face. Look at his eyes.
I know that they have some degree of autonomy given that they can walk into the hallways if they want during work, or they can get up and grab a cup of coffee. I'm talking though about real autonomy, making decisions for one's own life. They don't have that at all. I think the answer to the human question ain't so simple.
Human music. I like it.
How could we even measure this? If a crime was committed on Lumen Company time by Heli R, would Heli R receive a fair trial? If not, why not? What exactly makes her less of a person with less of an endowment of basic human rights when compared to her counterpart?
I am a person. You are not.
The innies in the show are absolutely treated as less than real people. And similar to something like Blade Runner or iRobot, that's an idea that the showrunners very clearly want us to scrutinize. Why is it okay for Bert, Christopher Walken's character, to be forced to retire, effectively ending his innie's life while the outie counterpart gets to live on? If an innie wants to quit, why is it required for their outie to give consent?
Your resignation request is denied.
But by definition, the innie could not consent to their own creation since they didn't exist before the outie decided to undergo the severance process. How do we reconcile that? One part of the person gets to make the real decisions. One part of the person gets to have autonomy. The other does not. With these questions, the natural extension into our own lives is this. To what extent do we otherize other people? What prejudices do we have? To what extent do we treat strangers as NPCs? Just beings that are sort of vaguely in our lives to ask that we meet deadlines or cut us off in traffic. How many people do you know that have a nasty case of main character syndrome? And how much of that same gross attitude is in you? If you're religious or ever have been, have you ever heard something like this? God sends people into our lives to bless or to try us. You've heard that before, right? But don't thoughts like this diminish the power of those people's autonomy? How could they really be sent if they have free will? At the very least, thoughts like these diminish our ability to appreciate the fact that everybody we encounter in our lives has a life of their own equally complex to ours. That's an idea that you may hear and think, well, yeah, duh, that's true. But when's the last time you really let that sink in? Everyone you pass in the street, the barista that hands you your coffee, the prick that cuts you off on the way to work, the homeless man that you see crossing the streets, everyone has a life that's just as complicated and involved as yours. They have hopes, dreams, job interviews, homework, deadlines, children, friends, depression, things they're thinking about buying, things that they regret buying, things that they're about to return. I made this very materialistic all of a sudden, but you get the point.
I love buying things so much, Morty.
Whatever makes up you they have it too, or some other complex cocktail of the human experience that's just as unique as whatever you've got going on.
3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quinoa lily, shake it over ice, and then add a thin slice of lemon peel.
That's a humbling thought when you really start to consider what it means.
I don't like my job, and I don't think I'm gonna go anymore.
If you think about the concept for Severance for like 0.2 seconds, it might sound really cool. You get to live your life as an Audi completely free of work. Who wouldn't want that, right? But when you begin to consider some of the ethical implications, the decision becomes a lot harder to make. So, given all the facts, or at least given some of the facts, some of the reasons for and against severing, why would anyone choose this? What factors in life could compel a person to split their mind in two? What circumstances would justify the creation of a lower class, subservient second self? The show offers lore, for lack of a better word, for each of the main characters that serve as starting points, ideas for why a person might choose to sever, and we get to decide if these reasons are compelling or not. In the end, Severance is a show that has its sights set on two targets. The first, good old-fashioned American entertainment.
That is some good, clean family fun there, eh, Cot? Right you are.
Which it does through its compelling mystery, impeccable editing and direction, and its strong performances. The second is Severance's real purpose, in my opinion, which is to ask questions of the viewer, questions that challenge our worldviews and invite introspection, questions that lay an issue before us, and then ask us to do something about it.